Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to our closing keynote. I hope you've been attending many or most of the sessions throughout the day. They were pretty fantastic. And I'm David Bergman. I'm the program director for New York School of Interior Design's Master Professional Studies in Sustainable Interior Environments. And for the closing keynote, I first want to thank Benjamin Moore for sponsoring us here. And now, I'm going to introduce and talk about our closing keynote speaker, Eric Corey Fried. And I'll make it a little bit personal. So Eric and I met at an eco-design conference so long ago that we were trying to talk about this. Neither one of us can remember what conference it was. And our conversations since then have ranged from serious ones like we'll be having today, serious debates, and then to debates about whether cinnamon raisin bagels are legitimate or not. And so I'm on the side, by the way, of the legitimacy of cinnamon raisin bagels. I see Eric shaking his head no, but I'm the lifelong New Yorker, so I'm going to say I'm right. But we do agree that blueberry bagels are just, those are just wrong, yeah. And so, back on topic a little bit, when I told Eric a few years ago that I was taking the position here of the program director for the MPSS, his almost immediate reaction was, when can you get me a gig to come talk here? And it took a few years, but here we are. And there are a few people who I semi-jokingly say I'd like to be like when I grow up. And one of them is Greta Thunberg. And I'm not totally sure that Eric is one of them, although we do happen to have wives both named Lori, so there's that. But he has written a lot more books than I have. And his talks have more entertaining slides, as you're going to see, which are just entertaining enough to make me quite a bit, or maybe just a little jealous. And I won't go on about too much about what an influence Eric has been on the industry. I think that his talk and slides will be self-evident. You'll see exactly what I'm avoiding saying because it's unnecessary. But just to tell you a little bit about him, Eric is an award-winning architect, author, and global speaker. As Senior Vice President of Sustainability for Canon Design, he leads the healthcare, education, and commercial teams toward better and higher performing buildings for over 15 million square feet a year. And for 2 decades, he was founding principal of Organic Architect, a visionary design leader in biophilic and regenerative design. And Eric's past roles include Vice President of the International Living Future Institute and Chief Community Officer of Eco Districts, both of which are nonprofits pushing innovative new paradigms for deep green buildings and communities. And Eric's the author of 12 books, including Green Building and Remodeling for Dummies. In 2012, he was named one of the 25 best green architecture firms in the US and one of the top 10 most influential green architects. And in 2017, he was named one of Build's American Architecture Top 25. And he holds a prestigious LEED Fellow Award from the US Green Building Council. So Eric will be talking for a few minutes, or perhaps more, on his views of where sustainable design and sustainable design education are and where we need to be going. And after that, we'll have a discussion as well as taking some attendee questions. And with that, Eric, you want to?
Hopefully this works. Hi everybody, how are you? Thank you for coming in person, those of you who are here in person. Those of you at home, there's free donuts and you don't get any of them. You can suck it. David, thank you for that introduction. Barbara, thank you for having me. Thank you, students and staff, for coming. When preparing for this, they said, listen, we want you to really inspire the students. We want you to be profound and inspirational and erudite and all these other adjectives that I had to look up. And they said, by the way, you have like 25 minutes to do it. So I'm going to do it very, very quickly. And the presentation I'm going to show you is not a normal presentation that I normally give. I put it together kind of special for you guys. So what I'm going to put together is a bit of a hodgepodge. Normally my talks have a beginning and then a middle and then an end, like a story. This is not really going to do that. So I just chill out a little bit because this could go horribly wrong. And what I found is that if your expectations surpass reality, that's usually when you get disappointed. So just prepare for the worst, kind of what I'm saying. And if you're under the age of 30 and you do the tweeter thing, you can do that here. Otherwise, I've also set it up for those of you at home, if you want a copy of the slides, text the word green to that number, and I'll leave the number on the slides for you. That is not my personal cell phone number, by the way, so don't send me any weird pictures of your junk to that number. It's just an automated service that I use, and it'll be in the corner of the slides there. Okay, so let's talk about the germophobic elephant in the room. For the last year and a half, 2 years, whatever, I don't even know anymore, we've been locked indoors, and really I see this as an opportunity to rethink what should normal be? How should we redefine normal? What should it look like? I don't know about you, but I picked up a bunch of weird hobbies over the last year and a half. I created these signs that I put on public bathroom, towel dispensers all the time just to see what people do. I started an art photography collection. I take pictures of people that are completely unaware of their Zoom camera, and I've got like thousands of these now. And what else did I do? I applied to be an astronaut. That's true. And I haven't heard that. What else did I do? Oh, I also applied to be a member of the Biden administration. And at the bottom they said, do you have anything unique or special about you that would distinguish you? And I didn't know what to say, so I just put comedian. I haven't heard back from them either, come to think of it. What else? I started a podcast with my friend Eve on the intersection of like care and healthcare and design, called Care by Design, that's true. And then I wrote a book. This is book number 12. What else are you going to do in a pandemic except write? And the reason I wrote about the circular economy was because I really see it as the framework we need for the challenges that are facing us. If the traditional way we make stuff is take, make, waste, right? We harvest stuff at great environmental cost. We then essentially slowly turn it into trash. The circular economy proposes an alternative to that. Really, instead of take, make, waste, it's harvest, make, and remake over and over and over again. And companies like Adidas and IKEA and Intel and Amazon and Patagonia have all embraced the circular economy, so that's why I wanted to write the book about it. So with all this kind of swirling in my head, the question becomes, now that we're coming out of our little cave here, where do we go from here? So what I want to talk to you about very quickly is three things. First, I want to talk to you about just the urgency of how to teach this. So as students and as teachers, how you can talk about really climate change without bumming everybody out. Number two, that we need to redefine how we talk about the cost of these things, because we're still kind of locked in that 1980s mindset of green buildings cost more. No, they don't. And then third, I want to talk to you about how we approach this as an innovation strategy. So that way you can start to see how to apply it to your own projects and also how you can teach this in studios. And I want to start with just the urgency of it, because you have to kind of set the context here. What I've realized is that a building is not just a building. And we can't think of it that way. A building is actually interconnected to a whole network of infrastructure and legacy systems and communities and neighborhoods and people. And to try to solve the world one building at a time is going to be a problem. So we need to almost take a district scale approach to every project. Even if you're just doing a tenant improvement build out, it's part of a community. And there's legacy systems there. And all of these are opportunities for us to do more. The other part of it is that a lot of the assumptions that we put into our buildings are no longer true. And in fact, they might never have been. We're designing, hospitals in Miami Beach, and we're not designing the air conditioning system for today. We're designing them for 2050, because it's just going to get hotter and stickier and wetter there, right? And at the same time all this is going on, we are building a lot of stuff. We're going to double the world's building stock by 2060. That's the equivalent of building an area the size of New York City every 5 weeks for 40 years. So we're in New York today. So imagine New York City every 5 weeks being built somewhere around the world. That's what's already happening. So here, I'll picture it for you. Here's New York City, and there's the Empire State Building, by the way, just to give you a frame of reference. And this is actually an old one, right? Let's look at today's New York City. You can't even see the Empire State Building anymore, which is always my big landmark. And we're building that every 5 weeks. And we will be for the next 40 years. That's the problem. So all of this is unprecedented. At the same time all this is going on, China is consuming all the world's natural resources. They're building 50 bridges a year. They're building a dam a day every day since 1949. They use more concrete in 2 years than we used in all of the 20th century here in the US. It's just an unprecedented amount of stuff, and you can't even conceive it. And then here in this country, we consume a lot of stuff at an immense amount. In fact, we build 4 new dollar stores every single day. If you're doing the math, that's a dollar store every 6 hours. And I don't know if you've been to a dollar store lately, but they're kind of, weird. There's a bunch of plastic junk, right? There are now more dollar stores than there are McDonald's, CVS, and Walmart's combined here in this country. And it also explains why last year we crossed a very weird tipping point. For the first time in human history, there's now more man-made stuff than there is biomass on Earth. In other words, those old roller blades and all that crap that sits in your closet, there's more of that stuff on the planet than there is life. And that's never happened before. So we've hit kind of peak stuff, essentially. And it explains why the richest guy on Earth is the guy that sells us all this stuff, right? That kind of tracks pretty well. So that's why I'm interested in the circular economy, because it could potentially fix that. Because whether it's take, whether it's make, or whether it's waste, all those areas make Kanye happy. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're all bad, essentially. You can laugh at that, it's okay, it's fine. It's like, I can feel you all pull back, like, what? I kind of feel like this is us. That we're just kind of like just completely unaware of the pending emergency that's looming if we just turn our heads to it. And yet, this is going on before most of you were born. Every president since JFK has been briefed on the risk of climate change. And what's even worse is that more than half of the carbon that we've released has been since 1990. So we've done way more damage knowingly than we ever did in our ignorance. So this is now where we are. The decisions we make in the next 18 months are going to determine the entire next century. So we can either have a hard couple of years and do the work, or we can really suffer for the next century. That's what it's come down to. And that's kind of the problem. So we're all kind of like, happy little dinosaurs just kind of working away, and we can't like look up and see what's awaiting us, really. Jim Collins has a book called Good to Great. And at the end of the book, he writes that he does this challenge to CEOs. And I want to give you the same challenge. In it, he asks them to write down their 5 most brutal facts facing them. And so I did this for the design industry. The 5 most brutal facts facing us, as I see it, and you can disagree, number 1 is that climate change is going to change everything. It's going to put a price on carbon, and that's going to change how we design our buildings, how we track them, how we measure them, and what our modicum of success has to look like. Number 2, liability is going to make whole areas uninsurable. And by areas, I mean geographic regions, but also whole industries uninsurable. They just won't be able to exist anymore. And we're already having those conversations with insurance companies right now. Number 3, we use a lot of concrete in our buildings, and we still don't have a low carbon alternative to concrete, and we need one desperately. Number 4 most brutal fact is that the sheer demand for materials worldwide means we can't keep consuming natural resources. We're going to have to grow building materials. We're going to have to use engineered living materials. Whether you like it or not, whether you're grossed out by it or not, it's going to have to happen. And finally, the 5th most brutal fact is that we're going to have to deploy technology in a way that we in the design industry have never really done before. And we don't really know how to do that well yet. Every other industry is doing it. We're going to need to do it too in order to speed and scale to the level that we need. And those I see as our 5 most brutal facts. And like I said, you're welcome to argue them with me, afterwards over drinks if you like. Okay, so that really leaves us with 6 things I think you all need to do right away for all of your projects, either studio or in the real world. Number 1, you have to make it as efficient as possible. Number 2, you have to target net zero on every single project. Number 3, you have to use every tool in your toolbox, and I'm going to show you a bunch of them today. Number 4, we need to measure everything measurable, and I'll show you a little bit of that. Number 5, we need to do it now. You can't wait till you're comfortable, or you're happy, or you're confident, get over yourself. We need to do it all now. And then finally, number 6, we need to use nature as a technology. Bioremediation, phycoremediation, passive solar, passive ventilation, thermal mass, all those things nature gives us for free, we need to now deploy at scale. And we need to look at technology in a new way, because we're not really getting the data or the insights that other industries do all the time. We're still dabbling with prefabrication and automation, and we could be scaling those up, really. So what we need is, for lack of a better word, an extreme makeover carbon edition, if you're into that kind of thing. We need to get to zero by 2050. And most of the cuts need to be by 2030. And 2030 is not 10 years away, as people keep telling me. Apparently it's 8 years away. It's 98 months away from now. We can start to count the days. And we need to make the bulk of the cuts. That means we need to radically transform how we do all of our buildings, because buildings are the biggest contributors. So there is no time for any of this. We're telling our clients that all of their 2040 plans, all their 2050 plans are today plans. They need to put them into effect today. And if they don't have a 2050 plan, dust off whatever you do have, whatever climate action plan you do have, and put it into effect. And if they don't have one at all, we make it for them. We're architects, and we're doing climate action planning for our clients because we feel we have to. There's this guy I follow on Twitter. He's based in Seattle, and he does these great tweets. And he did this over Christmas. And it really hit me because it was so obvious but so profound. And he said, we can save the carbon equivalent of 10 million cars off the road if we just took 10 million cars off the road. And I don't know why, but that blew my mind because it's like, oh my God, we've been talking about that for years and yet, yeah, we still haven't done it. The thing I struggle with as an architect on a daily basis is anytime we demolish a building, anytime we build a dumb concrete glass box, or anytime we don't target net zero, anytime we do these things, and believe me, we're guilty of it all the time just like everybody else, but anytime we do these things, that is a form of climate denial. We're denying the reality that's facing us, really. And I struggle with this. And I imagine you do as well. Because this is hard to accept. You can't keep going on one more building. It doesn't work for me anymore. The one thing that gives me hope, and I find I'm more hopeful now in my old age than I ever was when I was younger. The one thing that gives me hope is I think about this all the time. We destroyed the planet's climate by accident. We didn't mean to do it. We weren't trying to do it. We just did, oopsie, we did it. And what gives me hope is, imagine what we could do if we tried. Imagine if we put our minds to it, what the kind of things we could accomplish. That, believe it or not, that makes me feel better. And hopefully it does you too, because otherwise this is a pretty, depressing talk. Okay, so number 2 is looking at cost. I still have my students come in with that assumption, green buildings cost more. They state it as a fact. And I say, what evidence do you have to back that up? Because they don't really. I'm starting to suspect it's not really about the money in buildings. We're building $1.6 billion stadiums that are used 8 times a year to watch a bunch of millionaires play a game by people who are spending money that they can't really afford. So I don't think it's about the money. We were working on a cancer center. We would do a lot of cancer centers. And the bright idea I had is I said, hey, you know what's a good idea? Let's not put cancer-causing chemicals in the cancer center. And everybody said, brilliant. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea, right? Like, let's not give cancer to the cancer patients. And everybody agreed that was a good idea. And then the client, being the client, said, well, what's that going to cost me? And like any good sustainability person, I said, oh, it's, in the long run, it's free. But, up front, it's, $16,000, right? And just that word was still in the air. That $16,000 was still kind of floating in everybody's ears. And he was like making that face. And then he turns to the structural engineer and says, oh, that reminds me, where are we with the $26 million parking garage that we're building next door? So I don't think it's about the money, right? $26 million to subsidize everybody's car habit goes unquestioned, but $16,000 not to put cancer in the cancer center is like being scrutinized to death. So it's not about the money. I was on a project the other day and one of the engineers, made a joke. And this happens, and he said, hey, I ate a salad today. How many lead points does that get us? And everybody, laughed and ha, very funny jerk. And, I said, look, everybody knows it's 2. You get 2 lead points for eating a salad. Everybody knows that. But the point is, we shouldn't be selling lead. We should be selling the value that lead provides. We don't need to be selling well or green roofs or solar panels. We should be selling the value that they provide. I've always been just blown away by General Motors, who somehow convinced the entire world to pay for their infrastructure, right? They didn't pay for all the roads. They made the American taxpayer do it. $177 million a year goes to maintaining the existing roads. All in, $2.7 trillion spent since the 50s to build infrastructure for cars. Nobody questions it because they see the value in it. We need to do the same thing with green building. We do this all the time. Right? Nobody ever goes into an office and says, what's the ROI on that coffee and donuts you're giving the employees? I need a payback on that. Like, it doesn't happen. Nobody ever looks at the Christmas decorations and goes, what's the ROI on that? I have to approve it before you put them up. No! So it's not about the money. And we need to stop playing that game. That chasing of money is a trap. And we can't fall into it anymore. We've been doing it for 30 years. The truth is that a green building is a better building. You need to get that into your mindset. You need to bake that into your projects. Stop this altruistic, gosh, is it okay if I don't put cancer-causing chemicals in the cancer center? Stop it. We need to do it because it's the right thing to do. If we do our job correctly, sustainability doesn't cost you money, it makes you money. That's the point. We have to stop this game of apples to apples comparisons, or in this case, oranges to oranges comparisons, because there's orange slices, and then there's, orange slices. Like, they're not the same, basically. If we do our jobs correctly, we can save $10 trillion by the end of the century, and save ourselves in the process, just by keeping heating below 2 degrees centigrade. So everybody wins. Think about the normal healthcare institution, right? With its long waits, its low comfort, its high stress environment, everybody there's freaked out. Think about the typical education environment, right? Just bad design, bad lighting, waste everywhere. Think about the typical office environment we've become used to. Bad light, bad air, bad connection to our coworkers. If we start to measure these things and place value on them and show the outcome of this, if we start to measure these things, we could potentially change the world. So that's what I've been doing with my students. I've been asking them to measure things that were previously unmeasurable. Because how do we normally measure success in a building? I don't know, cost per square foot, maybe it's payback, maybe it's ROI, right? But how could we measure success in a building? Couldn't we also measure the recovery times of the patients? Couldn't we also measure the amount of stress that we reduce in their families? Couldn't we also measure the retention of the staff? All those things have value as well. So let's start measuring them. And how should we measure success in a building? Couldn't we also measure how much energy it consumes or produces? How much carbon it sequesters? How many species it provides habitat for? These things also have a value. So if we change what we measure, we can change the world. And the projects I'm going to show you were really all basically based around this very central idea of maybe we should change what we value and change what we measure, which leads to number 3, this innovation approach. Sustainability cannot be added on. It's not cinnamon that you sprinkle on it later. Like, it needs to be baked in from the start. One of the easiest things that I do it in my meetings with engineers and I do it with my students. We're sitting around and all they want to do is tell me what they think. And I said, don't tell me what you think, tell me what you wonder. Tell me about the possibilities. Tell me your big idea. And just that little agenda shift, don't tell me what you think, tell me what you wonder, changes the course of the conversation and moves it into one of possibility. It's simple and it's powerful, and I urge you to try it. Because we are surrounded by stupid people. I don't know if you've been aware of this for the last 2 years. This is a town in North Carolina. They banned solar panels because they were afraid the solar panels would steal the light from the plants. I'm not talking about shade. I'm talking about just would steal the soul of the light. I'm not sure where they were headed with this, but they would somehow steal the light from all the plants, and the plants would all die, including the lawns. And the worst part is one of the people on the committee was a retired science teacher. And so, this is what you're facing. So you've just seen what 2 years of stupidity looks like, right? They still can't get message. Science is hard, I know it. But you think that suddenly everybody's going to wake up and just want to be sustainable? It's not going to happen. It's just not good. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and people still don't know what green means, okay? So there's no way that they're going to understand the complexity of climate change, let alone what to do about it. Besides, people are preoccupied with, I don't know, whatever the hell's going on with ketchup right now. They're just busy. Their minds are elsewhere. Anyway, what was my point? Oh yeah, so innovation. Innovation is messy. It never looks the way you want it to look. And if you don't believe me, just remember that the inventor of the light bulb did it by candlelight. So I remind people of that just because innovation never works out the way you want it to look like, but yet it is a priority by virtually every CEO. They know they need to be innovative or they will fail to survive. They will not exist anymore. My childhood is filled with things that I loved, wonderful, innovative things that at some point stopped being innovative, and then they went away. It turns out that businesses are not designed for innovation. They're really designed to maintain the status quo of existing models, right? They're really good at efficiency, but not for innovation. So you need to choose innovation. You can't wait for it. You can't wait for the client to come in. No client is going to come to you and say, hey, you just graduated. Here's a lot of money to go be innovative. That's not going to happen. You need to push it on them. You need to choose it. You need to make it a priority for them. At Canon Design, we tell people that innovation is an avalanche, meaning that every snowflake must contribute to the avalanche. That's how it works. It can't just be one person. We need to choose it across the board. And if you don't know where to start with pain. Because pain is the gateway to innovation. What people are sick of is suddenly what they're most open to changing. So we map out what's driving you nuts, what's keeping you up at night, what are you spending money on? And suddenly they're much more open to alternatives to all those things. So really focus on the pain, not in a weirdo way, just like in a normal way of what's bothering you, and listen to your clients and you will be amazed. And doing this is how we've been able to manage to get the healthiest hospitals in the country, the greenest schools on campus, over and over and over again. One of the tools we use is we ask our clients to set their priorities. So I will literally turn the controls over to them and have them set the dials to what are their priorities. And I do, 100 workshops a year. which sounds like a lot. It's not. It's 2 a week. But it's, 100 workshops a year. And after 100 workshops, I am surprised every single time where they set the priorities. It's never where I thought they would set them. It's never where their RFP or proposal said they would set them. It's never where their design problem or OPR said they would set them. Suddenly, they're talking about equity and waste and carbon in a way that was never mentioned up until now. So again, focus on the pain, focus on what they're struggling with, and you will be amazed at the outcome. We do the same thing with expected ROI and payback. For HVAC systems, they might be willing to wait 12 years for payback. For staff enhancements, maybe they want to see that in 2 years. We do the same thing with risks and liabilities. What are they spending money on? We do the same thing with what's keeping them up at night. So wherever they are in their process, whether they're just beginning at the Camry stage, whether they've kind of moved up to the Prius stage, or whether they're full-on hardcore Tesla stage, wherever they are in their sustainability journey, we meet them where they are. Also, I put this in just for you guys. This is tools to use if you're not already using these. These are all transparency tools. If you don't know where to start with mindful materials. This is the best one, but they're all great. And then these are the tools that we use for embodied carbon calculation. Tally is a Revit plugin, and EC3 is the embodied carbon construction calculator. What we found is just by measuring this stuff, we can cut the embodied carbon in a building in half without even changing its appearance. I also put this in just for fun. These are manufacturers. I have no affiliation with them. I just really applaud what they're doing with transparency. So I'm sure you're aware of all of them, but it's a good place to start. Just remember that green comes in lots of different colors, and it might not be what you thought it was, and it might not be what your professors thought it was, and it's going to be up to you to push this innovation outcomes-based approach to sustainability. Okay, with that being said, I just want to close with one last thing. I teach at BAC up in Boston, even though I live in Portland, Oregon. I don't understand it either. But I want to show you some of our grad students' projects and how we got there, more importantly. And there were 6 requirements that we do, and I would urge you to copy these 6 requirements. They come in at the beginning of the semester and they have no idea what they want to do. And I tell them, whatever you do, you have to be passionate about it. Because it's a lot of work if you're not passionate about it. It's hard to fake that. Number 2, it has to be actionable. You can do whatever you want in your thesis, but I need you to make it real. Right? You need to be clear on what to do. Number 3, it needs to be solutions-based. It can't be a book report about how bad things are. Nobody wants to read that. And besides, it's already been done. Number 4, it has to have an audience. You need to have a stakeholder involved, at least one. But the more you understand that audience, the more the problem will start to define itself. Number 5, you need to have a clear plan. And one of the appendices they all do at the back is essentially a marketing plan of how they're going to do this. And number 6, it needs to have a life after graduation. I want them all to potentially see this as a roadmap for their career. And that changes everything for them. And I say, again, you can do whatever you want, but I want you to follow these 6 things. So I just want to show you very quickly what some of them have done. I've got a dozen of these. There's plenty more. But this was Jen. She came in saying, I'm interested in stormwater. I'm like, nobody's interested in stormwater. She's like, well, I am. Well, she drafted the stormwater policy and got it adopted by the city of Somerville, Massachusetts. She did that in a semester. This was Helena. She was bothered by construction waste. So she made a grading scale for materials so you can determine how to salvage and reuse them. This was Shalisa. She was a nurse, a 40-year retired nurse, and she went back to grad school. And so she redesigned new design standards for nursing stations that were patient-focused, that redesigned the layout of them. And it turns out nobody had been doing that before. This is Molly. She was bothered by food waste. That's what she came in saying. I hate food waste. I'm like, what do you hate about it? She said, well, it bothers me. I'm like, well, what are you going to do about it? And she mapped out the entire design statement and realized, you know what she could do? She could do a pop-up restaurant that uses ugly food, which we normally throw away. There's a whole thing of like Google ugly vegetables, and you'll see. And she started a campaign called Eat Ugly. And so celebrity chefs, pop-up restaurants in cool locations around Boston, serving food, and it raised money to feed the homeless. And she launched her first one the next semester after graduation. This is Joni. Joni came in saying, I'm into hemp. That's all she said to me. I'm like, well, who isn't? She said, well, I like hemp. And she was known as the Hemp Girl. That's the truth. Everybody said, oh, you got the Hemp Girl. I was like, good. Well, the Hemp Girl, in one semester, and for her thesis, went to, I like hemp, to the biggest problem with hempcrete is that nobody has design testing standards for it. I'm going to launch a Kickstarter campaign to raise money for those tests. And I'm going to make those tests open source and available to everybody. And then her final thesis presentation became a TED Talk that she recorded that semester. And in that same semester, while she was doing her thesis, she also became an advisor to the gubernatorial candidate for Vermont, who had a pro-hemp platform. Yeah, I don't get it either. It's amazing. This was Fred. Fred's Canadian. And I said, what's driving you crazy? And he said, well, there's a bunch of First Nations people, Indigenous people in northern Yukon Territory, Canada, and they use oil generators for electricity. I hate that. Like, what are you going to do about it? And he found a way to do free solar for them, partnering with the utility. Not only is it cheaper energy for them, which is great, but it's also obviously less polluting. This was Jennifer. She already teaches at a community college, so she started a building program. So students, many of whom were the first in their family to go to college, would build a house for themselves. They would design it, build it in a semester, and then live in it. And she figured out how to do that. This was Krista. She was obsessed with homeless people. That sounds weird when I say it like that. She was bothered by the homeless people, so she got city-owned land that the city gave her. She took waste from the municipal waste, ground up part of it, put it into a 3D printer, and figured out a way to 3D print homeless shelters. And this was in a cold climate, by the way, so it was kind of amazing. And then this is the last, I think this is the last one. Natalie said, I love biophilia. She was known as the biophiliac, I think is what everybody called her. And I said, what do you love about biophilia? She said, I think every school should have biophilia in it. So she created design standards that combine the Safe Schools Protocol, SEPTED, which I don't know if you've looked up, with the biophilic design patterns, and made a whole new set of how to design green schools that are also healthy and safe from active shooter drills using biophilia instead of fences and walls. It's kind of amazing. And now she's doing that as a consultant. He found a new way to calculate EUI performance in buildings, and he found a mistake in the 2030 data that he pointed out to them, which was kind of amazing. Brenna developed, she's currently doing this now, she's developing climate risk reporting standards for the insurance industry because she works in insurance and has for 20 years. And then last one, this is the last one, I swear. Rania wanted to design affordable housing for refugees. She said, that's what I'm passionate about. I'm like, okay, isn't that already being done? And she looked into it and she said, actually, yeah. So what else can I do? I said, well, what needs to be done? And she realized the refugees were getting free housing. The trouble was they didn't know how to acclimate to the United States. So she created an infographic guide that has been translated into dozens of languages now called This Is Home. And here they are reading it. And it shows them what to do and what not to do so they can acclimate to weird American customs, like don't start fires in the middle of your living room, which was the thing that they were doing. It's kind of amazing. So there's a quick smattering. I'm probably way over time, as I warned you. But anyway, in the time that I've been talking, another 1.5 million tons of CO2 has been released. So this little challenge of ours isn't going to go away. So I'm urging all of you to rise up to the challenge. I'm hoping this has opened your eyes to some of the possibilities. And if you can start to do this and embrace this way of thinking in your projects and in your real world, well, wouldn't that be the, I don't know, pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? And wouldn't that make everybody happier? Okay, like I said, if you want the slides, text green to that number that I put on the slides. Otherwise, you can also email me. But otherwise, that's my time. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me. Thank you for being here in person. Thank you for being there at home or in your pajamas. I don't know what you're doing. But thank you for all of that, and I'm happy to take panel questions up here. Thank you.
Wow.
How'd I do? I feel like I talked for a while.
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Could have gone on and on. Is this on, by the way?
Close to your face.
Get better.
Oh, better? Okay. So I can't resist. I have to start by asking you, did you really want to be an astronaut?
Yeah, I wanted to be the first Jewish astronaut. And no, I wanted to be an astronaut when I was 8, but now I'm too old. Like the other day I sneezed and hurt my back. So I don't think I'm qualified physically to be an astronaut. But I mean, it'd be fun.
I sort of went down this weird, I guess it's rabbit hole, looking at that slide and your next one about, wanting to be the comedian for the Biden administration.
the first comedian.
Yeah. Well, I figured that could, if you put those two together, make you the first comedian to go up in one of Jeff Bezos's rockets, which sort of brought full circle to one of your next slides about this all being about consumption and Amazon. So that was, I don't know where that took me. It went off in this, like I said, weird tangent. But there's something there somewhere. I I guess what really struck me in all that is, you talking about being a comedian on one level or another, but there's a lot of serious content in there. And it's great that you can deliver it in this entertaining way, but still it's serious stuff.
This is my coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I started, like a normal-ish person, and I would give talks 20 years ago, and how dire things were, and I noticed the audience was just falling asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And I was I'll never forget, I was in a pretty big room, I think it was 2002, and the audience was just not listening. And finally, it just like the little child in me just come out and said, something, and they perked up. And it clued me into, oh wait, if I can be entertaining, and then let my natural personality out, I think that maybe that'll help the message. And the weird part is that now people come up to me and say, I heard you speak 9 years ago, and you told this joke about concrete, which is, a really funny area of comedy, concrete. But you told this joke about concrete, and I still use that with my clients to this day. So there's a there to making it actionable in your mind by tying it to, a fart joke or something, and it seems to work.
Well, the other part of this, I was thinking, sort of counteracting the seriousness, through humor maybe, but that we all need to, I think you talk about your students, hanging their heads with all the seriousness, and I'm thinking we need to find the optimistic side of this as well, or we lose everybody, we lose the audience, or we lose the students. We have to provide some level of hope, and so I guess, and we have to do that in the midst of all this climate emergency issues as well, and we have to do it while avoiding climate fatigue. I mean, we've all been, most of us in here anyway, have been hearing about this for so many years that for one reason or another, we're saying, do I have to hear about this anymore? Or what can I do about it? So I guess where this is leading me to is talking about the role of optimism in the midst of the seriousness, and in general in the world, talking in the climate world, but also specifically, since we're talking about education, specifically with your students. How do you keep them going?
Well, every student goes through these. It very very much mimics Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. It feels like, right? They hear about sustainability, and their first reaction is denial. Well, it can't be that bad. And then they go and look at it. I don't remember all the 5 stages, so don't hold me.
They're too serious.
But eventually, the last one is acceptance. It's like, okay, if this is the state of the world, and I was unaware of this, maybe I can work together to do something about it. And so at that point in their pivotal thinking, I feel like my job as their teacher and maybe their mentor is to show them that they're not alone. We're going through a collective existential crisis. We just went through one with a pandemic. We're also going through one with the climate crisis. And so I'm hopeful because I want to be, if anything. Who wants to be depressed all day? It's a bummer, right? You can't. It just doesn't work. I'm hopeful because it's a much better option. And I'm hopeful because I'm excited. There's more stuff happening now than there ever has been before. Mm-hmm. So if you let yourself into that headspace, it's easy to become hopeful. And what I found is that enthusiasm is contagious. So if I get excited about it, they'll get excited about it, and then it'll come back to me, and it just keeps growing from there. So it's a wonderful blessing of mine that I get to work with these people. And I had this realization. I'm teaching grad students. They're choosing to be there, right? They're not undergrad. They're, who are like, woohoo, party. They're like, these kids are choosing to be there. And the one thing they have in common, they're from all different backgrounds, all different socioeconomic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, geographic backgrounds, political backgrounds. But the only thing that they have in common that we realized, and I imagine you have the same thing here, they all want to make the world a better place. Mm-hmm. It's obvious. So I'm basically giving them permission to use their thesis to do that. That's really it, right? Letting them do, because I think most of them think, well, it's an architecture school. I have to design a gas station or something? And I'm like, no, you can use this to make the world a better place. So what would that look like to you? That's why it starts with what's driving you crazy.
And we hear that, a lot of us hear, the solutions are out there. But I think what we're trying to tell the students is, not really, the solutions are in here. Whether it's in this room or classrooms, and we need to encourage that. And that's I think where I was going with the optimism part. How do we keep drawing upon that energy that they come in here with.
Yes. Well, it's funny because I think most students' first reaction is, well, what if that's been done before?
Mm-hmm.
And I tell them, well, no offense, but I would know if it's been done before. And you can just give them room to explore this area. And even if it has been done before, we talk about, well, what's been done and why is it not taken off? So even if they have an idea and they think it's original and they find out it's not, which happens a lot in these cases, well, if that's the case, then let's map out what went wrong with that execution. What could you learn from that? Mm-hmm. There's still an academic exercise to that. And then from it could sprout a whole new idea. I mentioned briefly Keith, who found a new way to calculate EUI. The first thing he wanted to do was to create a performance standard for buildings that everybody would use, and then he discovered the Architecture 2030 standard. And he was like, oh, and he was really depressed. And I said, no, this is good. What's good about their standard? What could they improve? And his first response was, who's going to listen to little old me? I'm just a student. And I'm thinking, we're all just volunteers here. We're all just hobbling this together. Like, we would welcome your ideas and enthusiasm, so dig into it. And he did find a way that they were miscalculating something. I don't want to make it sound like a scandal.
No.
But he found a math issue, let's say, and he pointed out that they changed their methodology, which I thought was great. And that's a grad student doing that within a semester. It's kind of amazing.
So you were encouraging them, in a sense, to go out on the limb, right?
Yeah.
To look for the ideal solutions, to be idealistic in the midst of all.
Yeah, we're Thelma and Louise. We're holding hands in the convertible, like going off the cliff together. Basically,
well,
that's the way I do it.
Well, that takes us back to the serious side of it. But so, looking back at another one of your early slides, and I think you were preparing us for in case your talk flubbed, which of course it wasn't going to happen. But you had something about lowering our expectations, right?
Oh yeah.
And again, I think you were trying to talk about yourself, maybe. But I think we can look at this in terms of the climate emergency as well. What are we expecting to come out of this? What are we expecting to be able to do? And I actually had a conversation about this a bit last night with Avi Rajagopal after his talk. And he brought up that phrase, the perfect is the enemy of the good.
Yes.
Right? So what level of encouragement and what level of idealism should we be trying to help our students get to or get away from?
Well, sustainability is held to these double standards. I touched upon just a couple of them with cost and how we process it. But perfect is the enemy of good. We see this with clients who've never done solar in their life. Go, solar panels, they're ugly. Well, so is an asphalt roof. You're going to do that without even questioning it. Well, solar panels, they have a 7-year payback. Well, that's better than anything else you have in your building. Well, solar panels, what else do they complain about? They have to be cleaned every now and again. I'm like, so do your windows. Like, so basically, I've been in it so long that I know what their objections are going to be. But, compare that to a coal-fired power plant and how disgusting it is and how people get black lung doing it, and you're telling me that you're unhappy with, I don't know, it's bizarre to me that we look for things wrong simply out of laziness and lack of inertia.
So I've been asking you questions about the climate emergency, and that was largely what we were talking about here. But there are all these other environmental issues as well, and a lot of them are I guess, not as sexy as talking about climate change for whatever reason. How do you find, or how do we find, a balance in addressing the urgency of that climate emergency versus all the other things we should be looking at in the environmental world as well, the less sexy ones?
Well, it's that's an interesting thing that I struggle with all the time because I'm interested in all of it, right? Like many of you, I'm interested in water. I'm interested in material health. I'm interested in air quality, and I feel like the urgency of carbon has really pushed that to our top of our priority list. So even at Canon Design, it's a firm that builds anywhere from 15 to 20 million square feet a year, and I feel duty bound to green up that impact that it has. And yet the priority for me right now is the urgency of carbon. Right. Because if the building's on fire, you're going to be looking for a fire extinguisher, essentially, and maybe not worry about the color of the wall, right, or what kind of paint it was using. But I'm trying not to do that. We're trying to raise all of these issues with clients. That's why I take them through a priority process, because if they don't care about carbon, okay, well then I'll do it in the background, right? It won't feed the narrative. But if their priority is health or circular economy and waste, great. Then let's really dive into that and build those outcomes into the project. And if you build them in at the start and you get buy-in from the client from the start, those things don't get value engineered out, right? A green countertop, oh, look at this countertop. It's made from recycled rice cakes or whatever the hell they make it out, right? Look how beautiful it is. That can get value engineered out because it's one thing. But the concept of we're not going to put cancer in the cancer center, that doesn't get value engineered out. That gets changed, it evolves, it grows, but it's baked in. And that's what I'm more interested in, is baking in these ideas that are much more bigger than the project itself.
So you're talking about this in terms of convincing the client on one level or another. And I used to talk about for the clients that just didn't care at all, that we just had to sneak it in and not even tell them we were doing it. It was just, we're going to choose paints with no VOCs. Do we have to tell them we're doing that? And maybe they learn it afterward, and maybe that helps move their needle a little bit. It's finding that balance between the climate issues, the other environmental issues, and the balance between what your clients want, what they think they want, and what we want.
Well, 20 years ago, I remember I did a lot of residential at the beginning of my career, and 20 years ago, I would sit there and I'd lay out materials, and I go, please don't pick the vinyl one, please don't pick. And then I kind of thought, why the hell am I even showing them
why put it there?
The vinyl one? I'm only going to show them green things, and then that changed. Is that for me?
Yep.
Batteries going in the waste, right?
It really does say dead battery. It's kind of funny. All right, but why aren't I only showing them green things? And that, it sounds dumb now. In fact, I feel embarrassed even mentioning that. But in 2000 or 2001, whenever that was a radical idea, believe it or not. And I think you talked about it in your book. Just this idea of,
thank you for the plug.
Yeah, why even offer the things to your clients? So, but this outcomes-based approach is also about getting their enthusiasm, getting their buy-in. I've seen clients, I had a client once, hopefully she's not watching. I had a client once, and the very first meeting, she said, I want a La Cornue stove. Do you know what this is, a La Cornue stove? Mm-hmm. It is a $20,000 stove made in France. It's a nice stove. My fee was $18,000. She was putting in a $20,000 stove, just to set the scales. It's a beautiful stove. You can cook like 8 things at the same time in a roast and a pancakes, and it's crazy. It's a gorgeous stove, but she knew she wanted it, and she earned it. It's her house, whatever. But everything else fell by the wayside because that was her priority. And I thought, that's what I want to tap into, that level of passion, that level of enthusiasm. Let's get the client as excited about sustainability as that, then it doesn't become about money. And suddenly you start to see this again and again and again. I'll show them, when I did a lot of houses, and we'd always do a kitchen and bathrooms, and ice stone was one of my favorite countertop materials. And anytime I'd show it to the client, they would just goo and gaw over it. They would just, oh my God, they would just fall in love with it immediately. And they didn't care that it was $65 a square foot, which
I didn't have that luck, but okay.
Right? But it's, it's pricey, but they would just fall in love with it, and it would go in, unquestioned. And I'm like, I need to do that with everything. And so that's what kind of clued me into this idea that it's not about the money. It's really, money becomes this thing when they don't care about it, right? They're not excited about it, so it's like, okay, well, what's the cost? That's how people buy TVs. I didn't want to be like that.
But it's also, I think, about educating our clients.
Yes.
That's a big part of it. And, 15 years, actually I know for a reason now, it was 15 years ago, I was working on a project for a client, and they had no idea what green was. And, I figured, okay, what am I going to do with this? So I broached the subject to her, and I said, well, if I can make it green, whatever green meant, if I can do that without blowing your budget and without sacrificing the design, are you into it? She said, yeah, sure. Whatever. And the reason that came to mind is that just last week, she gave me a call, which is fantastic. She wants to do another project. And she said, I've been looking at all this green stuff, and I've been looking at green materials, and I want to do more of it now. So there was that educational aspect of moving the needle for our clients by just doing it. And, not asking permission, at least in some cases.
No, that's the most amazing thing. I went from clients coming in saying, I saw your website, do your buildings come in any other color? That was a question I would get. I'm like, I gotta change that website.
To a different color.
To suddenly clients coming in saying, I know that I want a rainwater catchment system. Like, that's a pretty sophisticated thing to ask for.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, why do you want that system, and what are you hoping to get? And then that leads into a much bigger discussion around systems thinking, right? So
Yeah.
I think to be a designer means you're ultimately good at convincing clients to do things. And to be a sustainable designer means you're really, really good at convincing them to do things that might be much less common, things that they don't sell in Home Depot.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found is that eventually it comes down to trust. They have to trust you, the team has to trust you, you have to trust the contractor, and that's how we push things forward. The thing that's changed for me over the last 30 years is the urgency.
Yeah.
Right. That in '97 it was I could have a 4-hour debate with a client about something. Now I don't bother.
Well, now we keep hearing, this is the existential crisis. It doesn't get much more urgent than that.
Yeah.
So I have so many more questions for you. I have a whole stack of index cards here.
You sure do.
Well, that's credit to you.
You're like James Lipton inside the Actors Studio.
Okay, I think that's a good thing. But I'm told we've run out of time.
Oh, great.
So yeah, right, you're off the hook. But so, what?
Questions?
Oh yes, I didn't realize we weren't that out of time. We have room for questions from our audience here, and I think we're taking questions online also, Barbara.
Nope.
Nope, just in here. Okay.
That's what you get for not showing up. You don't get to ask a question.
Well, that's what you get for showing up. You have to ask a question.
All right. So thank you so much for a great presentation. Does anybody in the audience have any questions for Eric or David?
Oh, good. Jennifer?
Jennifer?
I don't know that it's a question.
Mhm.
When you talk about pain points, you talk about insurance, and you talk about resiliency in certain areas and possibly build businesses. What else can you add to that? Because that really hits, I hope really hits home.
Okay.
Oh, that's a great
Sort of
question.
Repeat the question, Eric, sorry.
The question was, when you talk about pain points and you talk about insurance and you talk about resiliency, what else falls in that category? Because that really hits home. And here's what's interesting. I feel like I'm developing a minor degree in ESG, environmental societal governance stuff, and corporate social responsibility, and lots of financial stuff that my brain doesn't really work that way. I'm an architect. But I feel like I've had to do this because it's important to our clients. So when we map out the pain points, for some of them, it's our shareholders are demanding bold climate action, and we're freaking out. If it's a university, it's our students are demanding bold climate action, and we're freaking out. And in universities, it's great because a quarter of their student body is new every year. So there's this quicker turnover of demands around it, and the schools are left kind of unaware. So they quickly jump into these commitments. I think there's more than 800 universities that have signed the Second Nature carbon commitment for carbon neutrality, but they have no idea how to get there. So they're committed carbon neutral by 2040 or 2050, and they're saying to us, what do we do? And my first question is, well, how does this building that we're designing contribute to that goal? And they said, we have no idea because we're at a loss. So that's why we're doing climate action planning for them. But we're also mapping out upcoming laws and trends, right? What happened here in New York with the local law 97, the carbon requirement, right, for footprint, that is, you don't know this, but that's sending waves throughout the entire country. I talked about it in Cincinnati 2 days ago because they're watching and fearful that it's going to come to them. So pending regulation, pending code changes, insurance company changes, regulatory changes, financial risk changes. The head of the SEC, Gary Gensler, said that by the end of the year, he's going to demand that all publicly traded companies must disclose their climate risk. This is huge, and these movements are happening so quickly now. I basically track this and put it into a news briefing that I release every quarter to everybody at Canon Design because it's moving so quickly. So I linked all these stories with the headlines so if they just skim it, they'll still get something out of it. And if anybody there wants to see it, I'll share it. And it does come out quarterly. So September 15th, I did the third quarter one. And the news that also gives me hope because you read these headlines and you're like, oh my gosh, things are really moving now. They're really cooking. And so it's kind of amazing. So I track all these things because it's such a lever to get the clients to pay attention.
When you talk about publicly traded companies, what about government agencies?
Oh, so we're talking about publicly traded companies and government or versus government agencies.
Well, government agencies, some of them, whether the storm between administrations differently. So if you compare, let's say, the GSA, the General Services Administration, which is doing kind of amazing things and is the biggest landlord in the country, with the DOE, which fell under a lot of scrutiny under the previous administration, without getting political, some are really affected by that and some are not. That's the good news. So it depends on the agency. But now you have essentially one of the Biden administration's 4 pillars is climate change. And their big legislative policy push this year is the Build Back Better program, which is all about climate change. And so it's addressing a lot of these things. And what you're going to see is a big push in existing buildings, which I don't think anybody's talked about before. And, you know, New York's Local Law 97 is a good example of that. Previously, we would have waited for permit. Oh, you want a permit? Well, we're going to make you upgrade the building. Well, they're not doing that anymore. We can't afford to wait anymore. So they're just requiring it of all building owners, including
Existing.
Right, including existing, but that'll include mandatory benchmarking and disclosures. And I mean, a rising tide raises all boats. And here we're affecting, I don't know, billions of square feet. I don't even know how much is in New York. And that's kind of amazing. And the penalties are steep. It's $340 a ton or something crazy if you don't comply. And you can buy carbon offsets for $60 a ton. So it's in your best interest to do this.
And originally, by the way, it was only very large buildings, and they've been
Yes.
lowering that threshold continuously. I think now it's down to 12,000 square feet.
Yeah,
And
something,
that's,
yeah.
you know, that's my walk-up
amazing.
building is that's that small or that big, depending on how you look at it. Do we have time for any more? Yep.
So my question is a little bit around equipping designers when they transition out of the education phase and into the field to really feel the confidence to fight for this cause against some of those clients who have maybe behemoth companies or really strong personalities in some cases. And I'm curious to hear your take or your advice on that, what we can do.
So how do us lowly designers convince our multi-trillion-dollar company clients? Is that?
Or not so, more so when we graduate from school and we're a new person in the field and we're going up to bat for this, how can we equip our teams to feel the confidence to go head-to-head against some of those clients?
All right, so the question is, how can a recent graduate have the confidence to bring up some of these issues? That's the bridge version. There's an old joke, and here's how it goes. In it, a shoe company sends 2 of their salesmen to Africa to sell shoes, and the first shoe salesman rings back home and says, "You know what? I'm coming home. Nobody here wears shoes." And the second shoe salesman says, "You better send more salesmen because nobody here wears shoes." It's a dumb joke. But the point of it is, it depends how you see the opportunity. You're a recent graduate, you're looking at it from a place of scarcity. Gosh, I just graduated, the world is so big, there's so much I need to learn, blah, blah, blah. That feeling never goes away, right? And unless you're a total tool, it shouldn't go away, right? You want to remain that level of there's so much to learn, there's so much to see, so much to do. That's a great feeling to have. And so if it's never going to go away, that means you can't wait until you're confident enough to do it. If you go into a firm and they're not doing anything with sustainability, well, nobody wear shoes. So you have an opportunity. You can either say, I don't want to work there because nobody there is doing anything with sustainability, or the opposite. Oh my God, I could totally take this and run with this football, and they would totally bow down to my prowess at all of this. So I know that there's a lot of areas of sustainability. My advice to you all is pick one thing that drives you crazy. Maybe it's material health. Maybe it's, like I showed you with Natalie in biophilic design in schools. Pick one thing that you're really passionate about. Just start with that one thing and then dive into it. Listen to conferences, listen to TED Talks, read articles. There's plenty of material out there, obviously. And become an expert in that one thing. And then just start bringing it up. And then tell your new boss, hey, I just graduated. This is important to me. This is where I want us to go. And you will very quickly determine, well, if you can grow in that firm or not, which you're going to want to know anyway. But I'm willing to bet that they're willing to say, well, that sounds interesting to us. Yeah, let's explore that. And then it'll be on the radar. And then clients will come in and maybe this is a fit for that idea. But keep bringing it up. Never let it go. And after you do that for one big idea, well, there's other things that are probably connected. So then you can do a deeper dive. I know it's overwhelming and intimidating to look at all the stuff going on in sustainability, and it is. To me, it almost feels like a full-time job just to keep up with the latest tools, just the tools is, you know, material health is impossible to keep up with. So it's a big world, but just choose that one thing and just do it. You know, I once met a person, it was a blind date, that's not important. Anyway, but they were a 5th grade teacher. And I didn't know what to say, it was a blind date, and I didn't know what to say. And I said, what's the best thing about being a 5th grade teacher? And she said, you really only need a 6th grade education. That's you right now. Like, you just graduated, you're passionate about it, and you will know more than most people in the firm. You're the 6th grade education, so you don't need to be an expert. You just need to know a little more than everybody else, and that's a great start. And if you really need help, there are consultants that you can bring in, and experts, and, you know, but, you know, that's the fun part.
And that passion becomes contagious.
Yes, it is infectious, which is a bad choice of words in the era of COVID, but, you know, good infectious, not gross infectious.
So we actually do have one question from online, and I think this will probably be the final question.
Mhm.
The final question. Also sounds ominous, sorry.
Yes.
The question is, and actually this went to something I was curious about as well, should design firms be paid based on measurable performance? And my question was, within a design firm, you are the Pied Piper, right? You also have to convince your colleagues toward this aim as well, or do you? So first question, should design firms be paid based on measurable performance in this era?
So what you're talking about is performance-based contracts, and I am a huge fan of this idea. Imagine the possibilities of a client coming to you and saying, I'm going to pay you X, but if you get the building to use less energy, I'm going to pay you a bonus. What a great incentive, right? It works for everybody. We're trying to do it. We're trying to talk to clients about it. We're trying to, you know, the one caveat is that it has to be fair and measurable to everybody. Energy is a good place to start. With carbon, it's a little harder to quantify, but we can quantify it. Where it really gets iffy is in health-based performance. So if I say I can improve, you know, patient recovery times by 3 days, well, that's quite a, you know, it's quite a thing to take on. And then you need to be continually measuring and attracting that data. So that's the only drawback, but I love the idea of this idea, especially around energy and carbon, because we model these buildings down to the watt per foot. It's pretty easy for us to do this and know that we can do it with confidence. So I'm all in favor. Again, if we change what we measure, we can change the world. So the short answer is yes. We should get paid for it, and we're dabbling with it now at Canon Design. And then the second part is, you know, our firm is a pretty big firm. There's 1,100 Canon designers, 1,100 plus Canon designers, and I really see my job as being their advocate, their mentor, their cheerleader, their support system. A lot of what I do is just give them permission to explore these things, because I have, you know, like this woman's question, I have 55-year-old designers saying to me, well, I'm not confident enough to talk about mass timber. I'm like, oh, well, I'll go with you to the meeting, and then after I do it once, you'll be fine, then you won't need me anymore. That's basically the teach them to fish model. So like I said, that feeling never goes away, and that's great. But so it's a large part of my job is playing, you know, evangelist, and then we do it with the clients. And that's the most powerful thing, right? If I get a client to like go, ooh, me want that, then the rest of the firm says, well, why did the client want that so bad? And then they're on board.
And that sort of brings us full circle, which is great because we're wrapping up.
Oh, good.
Full circle back to education of, you know, you're talking about giving your office mates the knowledge and the confidence to do this. And that's really what this is all about, what education is about as well. Is providing the knowledge and therefore the confidence that comes out of it.
Yes, well said. Yeah, hopefully you'll have an appetite for, you know, to be a designer means that you are a student of everything all the time for the rest of your life. That's why we choose this profession. We're hungry to solve problems, and to be hungry to solve problems means that you need to be constantly in a state of looking for problems to solve. That's, you know, that's our blessing and our curse, I think. And, you know, it's wonderful. You know, how many of you have been in a restaurant and you're like, oh my God, the acoustics in here could be so much better if they just did these 3 things, right? That's your life now. And it's, like I said, it's a blessing and a curse. But once you get into the sustainability mindset around that as well, then you'll be doing that not just with acoustics, but with carbon and material health and waste and water and resources and everything else.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
No, thank you.
So I'm going to wrap it up too. Sorry, I'm speaking to the back of your head. I'd also like to thank our sponsor for this evening's presentation by Eric Corey Fried, which is Benjamin Moore. I'd also like to thank our other sponsors, the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation is a major underwriter, Sandown Material Bank, Perkins & Will, IIDA New York, Ennead Architects, Design for Health by MindClick, Robin Regie and Taibu, and MEBL. I'd also like to thank everybody at the New York School of Interior Design who helped make this happen, especially my co-chair, David Bergman, Director of External Relations, Laura Catlin, and Dean Alan Fisher. And we leave you with this. The problem of climate change and inequity and sustainability, as designers and educators, that is indeed our problem to solve, as much as any scientist or sociologist. We hope that we've sent you off to teach and practice with ideas and inspiration. We believe in our students. Let's help them prevail. And thank you for coming.